I left that day and I went shoplifting and went and sold it.
You went shoplifting? Where?
Yes. Um. Oh Lord, can I say the store?
Never mind. Well, hello, beautiful people. It's your girl, Shy-Bivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Legally Clueless Entrepreneurs Podcast, where I share lifestyle, side hustle, and business gems that can help you improve the quality of your life and business. Now, today I am super excited because I have a very special guest and friend, Oj with the Fro, okay? We're going to be sharing, or he's going to be sharing his financial journey, okay? How you can go from tragedy to triumph, from having a low credit score to higher credit score to have purchasing power and acquire real estate or even acquire your first property. Now, he's going to be sharing some of the things that he went through, his process, and he's also going to share with you all some tips as to how you can overcome some of the everyday obstacles in purchasing your first home. So listen, he's going to get real with you all, okay? That's what I like about OJ, okay? He is authentic and real, all right? If there was anybody that I could have on this podcast today to talk about how to fix your credit, how to repair your own credit so you don't have to, pay a whole bunch of money to credit people, because child. And we're just going to get into it today, okay? We are going to get into all of it, all right? So I am happy to introduce to you all Mr. OJ with the Fro. So welcome to the show, OJ. Super excited and happy to have you here, all right?
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So listen, I just want to get right into it, right? Tell the audience a little bit about OJ. Who's OJ?
I'm OJ with the Fro, as y'all can see. Shenice and I, we talk a lot about just finances and, our personal journeys, and from time to time, just on a personal note, hey girl, how you doing? Stuff like that. I have an extensive background in the financial industry, lending, banking, mortgage, just to name a few. And so, Shenice and I, we always speak about our personal issues, and so I agreed to meet with her today to discuss some of my journey, as well as give a few tips on how you can improve, your credit score, buy that first house, and I'll give it to you, real deal Holyfield. So.
He's going to give it to us real, okay? And first of all, let me just say how this podcast episode came about. We were literally just having a, normal old conversation like, we typically do. And, I'm a curious person, so I'm always asking questions. And the topic came up about, him fixing up, this new home that he, purchased and all of that. And so here comes the question. And
you were like, you bought a house?
Exactly, right? And like, I was just so interested in everything that he was saying about his journey. And I was like, listen, I need to get you on this episode, okay? My podcast. So here we are. All right, so let's talk about your journey. So you are a new homeowner. When did you purchase your home?
I purchased my home back in February.
So this February, 2022.
Correct. Before these interest rates,
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's for a whole new episode. I'm telling you. So yeah, what was that journey like? Like, how long were you looking for a house? Let's talk about that.
I will say that, I would say my journey began years ago. I had some financial mishaps, and so it sort of halted my journey a lot. Years ago, of course, being young, running up, the credit cards on the Hermes and, I found myself in a plethora of debt. At a young age, I started making a good income and things like that. So, with that being said, having no background in finances from my family, you start to, get that first big check or whatever that you think is a big check. And, you just start shopping and, spending unnecessary money, maxing out credit cards, doing all that hoopla. And so, found myself at a very early age, in a plethora of debt, maybe over $60,000 by the time I was 21, 22. And so, I had those older friends telling me like, OJ, stop spending money on those credit cards. It's going to catch up to you. And I'm like, girl, please, I pay my credit card off every month and, just floating debt pretty much. And, looking back on our floating debt, found myself bankrupt, literally, in the court of law. And so I found myself in a plethora of debt. And so maybe, upwards of $50,000 or more. And so I felt like it was the end of the world. And so I felt that my alternative was bankruptcy. Never had been late on the payment. I think I was, 22 at the time. It overwhelmed me. My American Express Platinum card was due. And I was so overwhelmed. I was riding the car with a friend at the time, and I was like, I'm so overwhelmed. I think I started crying that day. And I'm not an emotional person, but I started crying. And so she's like, oh my God, she didn't know what to do. And so I ended up doing research, finding a bankruptcy attorney. And so when I met with the attorney, he gave advice, hey, file. Looking back, I wouldn't have filed. We'll get into that later. But I filed, and, felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It's a little intimidating, not having your credit cards to fall on, and not being able to acquire new debt at that time. So used to living on credit.
So first of all, OJ, I wanted to ask, so how at 22 you got an American Express Platinum card? And people at 30 can't even get that card. And second of all, you said that you were working a good job at that time, right? Like what were you doing at 22? And did you go to college?
No, I had my American Express at 19.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And how did you get that?
I applied and I got approved.
Oh, wow.
No spending limit. No credit limit or whatever at the time.
No credit limit.
No preset spending limit at the time.
At 19?
At 19.
Do you know what your credit score was?
To be honest, probably not. I think I had at the time maybe, 2 credit cards with $1,000 limits.
Oh, wow.
That at the time probably were maxed out or near maxed out, or maybe not. That's when I would pay off debt, every month.
Oh, okay.
I would,
like the minimum payment paid off, or the minimum payment.
But my credit line was probably $1,000, maybe $2,000, so it was a lot easier to just pay off in full.
Right.
I would have my friends telling me, "That's gonna catch up to you. It's gonna catch up to you one day." And I'm like, "Girl, please! Like, I can pay this little $1,000 with my paycheck next week. Like, get out of my business."
So what kind of job were you doing to have $1,000 to pay off? Like, were you living with your parents? Like, where were you living?
I was still living at home with my mom, so minimal debt. I think I had my car note at the time was like, it was $500. At the time, which, $500 is not much
now,
but,
back
at the time, yeah. I mean, it's still a lot, but at the time, I think my car insurance was probably $260 a month when I was young, and phone bill probably $150. So, and I think at the time I was making, right at $50,000 a year. Mm. So, not many expenses, but, pretty decent salary for a 19-year-old.
So what were you doing at, 19, 22? What kind of job did you have making $50,000 a year?
Well, I dropped out of high school when I was 15 in the 10th grade. And so I would spend like a lot of my time at a girlfriend's beauty shop. She was an older girlfriend. And so I would be at her hair salon and see all the women come in with their, fancy handbags at the time. And I was like, I want that. I want that Louis Vuitton. And, this is, the mid 2000s or so, maybe late to mid 2000s, before 2010. And so I was like, what do you do for a living? And so, the ladies would be like, oh, I work customer service. I work collections. I make, $15 an hour. And I'm like, really? I'm like, $15 an hour? Like, Wendy's is only paying me $6. Like, $15? And so they're like, yeah, I make $15 an hour, I make $13 an hour, I get a bonus of $1,000 a month. And I'm like, oh my God, $1,000 a month? Mm. And so from that, after I dropped out, and speaking of dropping out, the lady at the front door of the school told me, if you leave this school today, I had left in the middle of the day to get food. And she said, if you leave the school today, don't worry about coming back. I took her advice. I didn't come back. Not glorified.
Oh, wow. So you...
Not glorifying it, but glorified for me. So
that's literally how you left school at 15 and just didn't come back?
Yes. The person at the door, I went to like a school, in the, I guess not the best parts of town. So they had like a table that sat at the door with the metal detector. Yeah. And so she tells me I would leave every day to go get food. And so she says to me, if you walk out that door, and it's probably like 11 a.m. So, I wasn't a regular class skipper like the regular kids. My mom would let me use the car and get myself to and from. I guess she was just lazy or whatnot, so she would let me use the car. She would say, take the keys.
Yeah.
And this is at 15, no driver's license or anything. So I'm at the school, and so every day I'm leaving. And so this particular day I leave, and so she tells me, if you leave, don't worry about coming back. And maybe like a week prior to that, I had started, falling off in class or whatever. I just didn't have a desire to be there or an engagement in my mind to be there. And I remember a history teacher told me that, you in my class sleep? You ain't gonna have anything. You know, he didn't use those words. But he's like, you ain't gonna have anything. You ain't gonna be anything. But he used,
Right.
you know, the other words. And so I remember just feeling discouraged at school. I didn't feel like school was for me at that time. And so when I left that day, she said, "Don't worry about coming back." And so I'm thinking to myself, "Don't worry, I won't." And so I think I left, and I left that day, and I went shoplifting, and went and sold it.
You went shoplifting? Where?
Yes. Oh Lord, can I say the store?
Never mind.
It was a popular clothing store back in the day, but I would shoplift instead of going to school because
Where were your parents?
She was working, and you know she would work nights, and so that's how I was able to use the car and go to school because she would work nights and she wouldn't want to get up and take me to school. And at the time, the bus stop was nowhere around. Like I would have to walk far or whatever. I think I complained, and so she was like, "I'm sick of you complaining. I'm not taking you to school every morning. So you know, just take the keys or whatever." I leave school that day, and I'm like, I'm not coming back. And so I end up at the local mall at a Barnes and Noble because it's probably about 9:15 when I left school that morning. I make it to the shopping mall around 9:45, so I end up at the Barnes and Nobles with the Starbucks. I go to the Starbucks. I have me a brownie warmed up and a caramel macchiato at the time while waiting.
Well, you were having your own school at Barnes and Noble.
I wasn't reading anything. I was just waiting for the stores to open. If you're at the mall at well, at that time at least, maybe still today, if you were at the mall when they opened, you could ease in and ease out. And the store, I won't say the name. I would go into those dark stores when they opened, and so everybody's sleepy in the morning, so you ease in and you ease out. By the time 10:30 come, you've already made your money. 11 o'clock, you're able to go and pinch your items and get rid of them, and and stuff like that, and make your money. So between shoplifting and making that fast money, I would say maybe from 15 to 18 years old, around the time of my 18th birthday, I was like, I don't want to go to jail or get a record. And so I gave up, shoplifting for good. I had, more for my life and thoughts and everything, and, seeing the ladies at the hair salon. And also, I might add, one of my girlfriends, she was maybe 2 years older than me, and I would ride to school with her. She got a job with the government processing immigration visas. And at the time, this was probably in 2008 or so. And so she tells me, hey, they're hiring. And I'm 17 at the time. And so I had given up shoplifting by that point. She told me about this job. She's like, apply. And so I had to go and do a typing test at the workforce office. Do the typing test, pass the typing test after 15 tries. So I'm not a good typer even to this day. And so get this job with the government. At 17, they have my ID. Wow. They hire me at 17 under the premises that I'm 18 because I put a later year on my documentation. They hired me. I gave them my ID. I gave them my social security card. No one ever looked at the date that I put on the application versus my ID.
Verified it.
So they just hired me. So I'm 17 with full benefits, 401k.
Oh, wow.
All these things.
Did you even know what a 401k was at the time?
No, absolutely not. I don't think I even signed up. Or maybe I did. I can't remember. I had heard of one, but I'm just sitting in orientation like 401k, okay. And so, at 17, my girlfriend, she's 19, so she was a little bit more mature. And so I remember like all of my coworkers that sat around me, they're much older. And so I'm like the talkative one. And so they're like, you talk too much. Like, get your work done. But yeah, I had that job. And they were paying me, I want to say like $26,000 a year. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on top of the world. And I ended up getting fired for calling in. I called in
calling
too
in
much.
sick?
Yes. Well, what happened was I called in and I think I made like a fake doctor's note or something at the time. I don't know. I can't remember. But she called me and was like, hey, we called the hospital. And the hospital said that you weren't there, or this hospital name is not the same, something or another. I can't remember, the details. And so I remember I was all nervous. She was like, you're on administrative leave. And so I put in my notice like that same evening because I was so nervous. I'm like, I don't want to get fired. Because you
knew you were going to get fired?
Yeah,
so
I don't want to get fired. And so
you try to beat them to it.
Right. So from there, I'm like, oh my God, now I have to find me a job, making at least, $26,000 a year. So after that, I ended up pushing carts at a local supermarket for like $6 an hour, to get my phone bill paid because I'm at this point,
Oh wow,
I'm not in
$6.
school. I'm 17, almost 18 with, I'm not shoplifting. I would go with my girlfriend at this time, but I'm not personally making any money at this time.
Right.
I'm not trying to, destroy my record. And so in between that, I'm applying for customer service jobs like crazy. And so as I'm applying for customer service jobs, I'm getting turned down because they're like, you don't know the dialer. I didn't know what the dialer was. And so I'm like, oh, snaps. Like, what is a dialer? And so after about, 5 failed job interviews for a customer service job, I'm like, well, I'm going to just start lying and tell them I know what the dialer is. And so I tell them, I know what the dialer is. And so I get this job at a third-party collection agency, finally, and start working there. And a coworker of mine, she asked one day, hey, can you give me a ride home? I live, on your route to the house. And so I'm like, sure. And at the time, gas was high. This is like the 2008, 2009 era. Because I'm
that's when the recession.
At this point, I'm 18. Yes, at
that's
this point, I'm 18.
recession.
Yeah, I'm like $3 and change. So it's not as high as it is now, but it was that astronomical high at that time.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was driving a large SUV that my mom owned, and so she said, hey, I'll give you, gas. I'll give you $20 a day or whatever, $20 every 2 days to drop me off. And so I was like, cool. And so maybe about 4 days into dropping her off, she tells me, hey, by the way, I'm leaving the company, this third-party collection agency. I got a job at a huge bank collecting. And so she's like, I got it through a temporary agency. And so I'm like, tell me more. I want to get on. I want that job. There's where the crabs in a barrel, story comes, to play. Well, you have to have so many years of collection experience and this and that. And I'm like, well, just give me the information. Well, I don't think it'll be a good fit for you. And, crabs in a barrel.
Right.
And so she tells me, but she had already told me the name of the company, she didn't tell me the temporary agency, but she told me the name of the large bank. So instead of me finding a temporary agency, I go directly to the large bank's website and apply. I get a call back like the next day.
Oh wow!
For an interview.
So you skipped the
yes,
the third party stuff.
And let me back up a little bit. Between 15 and 18, between my little shoplifting stints, and I will say this, people, I was always ethical. Even jobs that I worked, I never stole from a job. I never did those type of things. Maybe a few discounts, but I worked at like a lot of jobs between 15 and 18, just trying to find myself. What do I want to do? And so when I finally got the job at the large bank as a collector and got the job, aced the interview. I remember the interview, the lady is like, tell me about your experience. And so, I'm embellishing my experience and whatnot, but, I get the job somehow.
So you asked your friend about the collection job. Mm-hmm. You went straight to the bank website.
Correct.
Okay. And then you started as a collector, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this is what I want to touch on, persistency, though, because during that period of me getting hired at the large bank, got a call from the recruiter. Hey, we're going to offer you the job. This is the salary. The salary was, I'll give numbers. It was like $30,000 a year. And, I'm like super ecstatic. The recruiter says, we're going to start your background check. I never had a criminal record besides, maybe a few, traffic tickets here and there, traffic citations. And they had me fill out the form for my job history. One job I got terminated from, and I didn't disclose it. I got terminated. I think I got laid off or I left. I can't remember. It was like, some, teenager type job between 15 and 18. And, I think it was like a shoe store or something. And I got fired, but maybe I didn't get fired. I don't know. I think it was like one of those, holiday working jobs. And so I don't know if I was fired or laid off or what. So I think I put that I was laid off.
Okay.
And so they put in their system I was terminated. And so the large bank called and said, hey, unfortunately, we have to rescind your offer because when we did our background check, it came back that you were fired and you put down that you were laid off.
Oh, wow. So would you say that it's best to just be, that would be
I don't think it matters now per se, because now everything is considered a termination, whether you quit or leave. But back then...
Oh, really? How so?
Well, you have a termination date now. people pull like the work number and things like that, and they show termination dates. So it didn't really say the premise is whether you left or not. But back then, it was more personal. Okay. So when they would call up, the HR would say, hey, they were terminated. And I think at the time that the large bank just wasn't advanced as much as they should have been to, divulge. And then, state laws and things like that, you really can't, give too much information. They just heard, hey, he was terminated.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh no. So she's like, we have to rescind your offer. And so I remember telling her, hey, don't rescind it yet. And she said, what? Excuse me? And I'm like, hey, don't rescind it yet. I'm going to get this taken care of. So, the shoe store was like a large chain or whatever. And so I remember calling to the store. None of the managers that I worked with worked at the store anymore. One had moved out of state. The other two managers that were there when I was working had left the company. So I literally called around, tracked down the one manager that still worked with the company in another state. And I was like, hey, what happened with my employment? Was I fired? I don't remember. I just remember, not being on the schedule anymore. And so she was sort of like, well, I don't remember either. I wasn't the manager that hired or fired, necessarily. So she put me in contact with someone in HR, and she was like, contact this person here. They can divulge more. And so anywho, it was put into the system that I was fired, but technically I just, was never called back to work. I was technically fired, but I was like, hey, I was never called in for work. And they were like, well, you were terminated. We don't see a reason. And so she was like, apparently I'm going to assume this was a layoff. I'm going to assume. She said, I don't know the parameters. They were like, no notes from any managers or whatnot. So she wrote me a letter personally for me to give to the new recruiter with the large bank.
Oh,
Get
wow.
it to the new recruiter. They had it approved, and,
oh, wow.
reinstated my offer.
Look at that. Wow.
Blessings upon blessings.
Right. That's amazing. So you really really worked your way. It shows you though, that's why sometimes you kind of have to really be persistent, not take the first no.
And I learned that early on not to take the first no.
Right.
I think that's very important for young people now. Don't. And it's not about being nasty about it. It's about, knowing what's best for what's best for you. And I think that a lot of the younger generation believe let me fight every battle. I'm not saying not to fight for what's worthy of you, but pick your battles too. Pick your battles, but do it in a very intellectual way.
Right. Absolutely. So so now you're working at this big bank, making $30,000 a year. You feel like you're on top of the world. Right.
At 18. And just know this is, years ago when $30,000, actually
something
meant some sort, you could get, rent for $500-$600 a month. So, it meant something.
Right.
In a nice place, in a beautiful place. You were a beautiful place with $800 a month rent.
So at this time, where did you move out? Were you living on your own?
I remember still staying at home at the time, still at home. And 2 weeks into my large bank collection job, there was classroom training. We do the classroom training. I remember falling asleep in the classroom training. I remember, I missed so many key points in training. When we started on the job training, I remember people calling in needing, assistance. And I was like, I don't know how to help you, because I didn't know how to do the task in the system to help these people out, because I was asleep during the classroom training. And so, and I was embarrassed to ask for help, because I'm like, oh Lord, they'll clock me. They'll know that, I didn't pay attention in training, and I don't know how to set up these payment plans and this stuff here. And so luckily, about 2 weeks into on the job training, we're pulled to the side, my team and I. It's probably about 11 of us or so. And so they tell us, hey, your team was chosen for a special project.
Okay.
And so we're like, okay. And I remember working the job. It was this one lady. She was a higher up manager on the floor. And I remember she dressed in these nice, jeans of True Religions and stuff every day. She had the different, colors and stuff. And I was like, oh, and, in awe at the time. Because I was like, I want some True Religions, at the time. And so she would always have her hair done, really nicely. And I was like, I want her job. And so she came to tell the team that, hey, you all have been chosen for a special project. And while telling us, she tells us, hey, I wish I was chosen too. Like, this is a great opportunity. And like, as she's telling us this, I'm like, oh, she really wants this job that we have. Like, okay, we got lucky. And so they tell us, you're no longer going to be on the phone. We're going to move you all to your actual own desk. You know, still a cubicle, but you're going to like get phones. You're not going to be on a dialer. You're going to be, you know, working with this new team. And so when they move us over, you know, they tell us, hey, you all are going to start helping out the underwriting department.
Okay.
Because they're backed out. They're backed up.
And this was what year you said?
This was in 2009.
Okay, so that's when like the recession.
Correct.
So they probably had a lot going
Correct.
on
So
back
a lot
then.
of servicing and a lot of default issues going on in that period.
Yeah.
And so underwriting, there are two sides of underwriting. There is, you know, the origination side, then there's the servicing side. And so this was more so the servicing side at the time. And so they're like, you're gonna help out, you know, underwriting. And as we're sitting there calling people to collect documentation for the underwriters, I remember one of my coworkers are like, hey, did you know underwriters make, you know, $90,000 a year?
Wow.
Or $80,000 a year, you know, something astronomically more than what we make, you know, what I made at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, really? And so she's like, yeah. And I'm like, what is an underwriter? You know, what? I've never even heard of that. Like, girl, like, I'm happy to be a customer service. I'm happy to be here, you know, able to leave and go get my coffee as I please. Like, girl, you talking nonsense. Like, what is that? And so she's like, hopefully they train us or whatever. So I'm like, okay. Fast forward, they tell us, okay, you all are collecting docs. We want to teach you all how to start putting these things together and getting them ready for the underwriter. Because at this point, we're just collecting docs. We're just calling people saying, hey, we're looking at a list. Hey, we see here you haven't provided your pay stub. You haven't provided your
okay. So it sounds like a loan processor. I did that.
Yeah, but it's a pre-processor. You're just calling, literally saying, like, hey, we don't know what in the world these documents are.
Right, because the underwriters, they'll put the notes in. This needs this. This needs this.
We have no clue what the documents are. We just know, hey, you're missing a pay stub. You're missing a hardship letter. The hardship letter.
You're just saying what's on the paper. Yeah. What's in the file, but you don't actually know what it is.
Yeah, your hardship letter said you got a divorce and stuff like that, but you didn't say how that affected your finances. You know, you said you had cancer, but you didn't tell us how that affected your finances.
Oh wow.
You said you were in a major car accident, but you didn't say how, you know, that affected your finances. We need you to break it down more. So, you know, things like that we will call about. But then they were like, you know, you guys are going to start processing these things, meaning you're going to start, you know, actually knowing what to look for and making sure they're ready for the underwriter to make a decision.
Okay. So, all right. So hold up, back up. So this girl says underwriters make $98,000. Y'all are basically doing half of the work, right? Yeah. In a sense.
Oh yeah.
For the underwriters.
Yeah, in a sense.
So I hope you get to the part where they say you get a raise.
We start mini processing or whatnot, and so then they tell us, hey, we need more underwriters.
Oh wow.
So they tell us, hey, go start, you know, shadowing underwriters. We start shadowing underwriters, and so this is when it gets real.
Okay.
You're shadowing these underwriters, and you know, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. My rent is $1,600 a month. I drive this fancy BMW. Oh, I do this, I do that. I take trips.
Right.
Now it's getting real to me. Like, and y'all are paying me what? Like, I can't afford to do all this. I mean, I could. I didn't have any bills, but you know, like they're like, I got rent, kids, and I'm still doing it. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And so then, you know, as a team, as a collective, we start getting together, like complaining. We're like, this ain't gonna cut it. Like, you know, how much you make? Mm-hmm. I make $13.50. How much you make? I make $14. How much you make? I make, you know, $12. I make $15. So at this point, we start. You know,
was that a month for those people?
No, an hour. $.
Oh, $15. Yes. Okay.
So at this point, we're like talking, you know, small talk now. Like, how much you make? You know, breaking the rules. So we're like, we got to take this to the manager. And at this point, they move us over to the underwriting manager.
Oh, wow.
So we all have the same managers, but we're at a disadvantage in pay. Everyone else is making all this money. And let's be clear, servicing underwriters don't, you know, necessarily make a lot of money. But these underwriters were underwriters prior to the market crash. And so they didn't change their salary. They just moved their positions. So that's why a lot of them were still making a lot of money at the time. Most of them did origination underwriting, and they just had been with the company for a while.
Okay.
And so we complain. So they gave us, a little, I think 20% raise or 15% raise at the time. It was like their max. So in the interim, I started applying for other underwriting jobs. Applied for another major bank. Got a call back from the recruiter. The recruiter tells me, or the recruiter asks me, how long have you been underwriting? I tell him, for a few months. Maybe 2 or 3 months at the time. And he's like, oh no, I don't even know how it even popped up for me to even call you.
Wow, he said that?
Yeah, I don't even know how it popped up for me to even call you. You don't have enough experience. Like, how did this even happen? Yeah, they're not going to want you. No lie, facts. No cap, facts. And I'm just, I'm at the time, I think I'm still 18. I'm blown away. I'm like, oh, really? Or maybe 19, maybe 19 at this point. And so I'm like blown away, like, oh my God. And so, we end that or whatever. So maybe 2 to 3 months later, the same recruiter calls back. He says to me, they want to interview you. I don't know why, but they want to interview you. You don't have the experience. I don't know what these people are doing. They want to interview you.
I mean, sometimes when something's for you, it's just for you,
Yes, he calls back and tells me those words. I don't know, why, but, they want to interview you. So I go to the interview, my little, 19 unprofessional self at the time. And I remember going into the interview, telling the manager how pretty she was and how I liked her makeup. But anywho, fast forward, I get the job.
Yeah.
And so, that's when my pay is raised. It's not raised to $90,000 a year, because at the time I didn't know I got hired as a servicing underwriter.
Oh, okay.
So I'm making like $50,000 a year at the time.
Okay.
And so
$20,000 more than
$20,000, right? So before I left that job, I'm like walking around telling all my coworkers, because at this point they still have us on the collection customer service floor.
Okay.
They just have us, in the middle of the floor, making everyone else jealous. And making everyone else just envious of us. And so I remember like being so unprofessional. I walked around telling all my coworkers, hey, I got a job at so-and-so, and they're going to be paying me so-and-so. Just unprofessional, looking back. And so I get the new job or whatever. And so working at that large bank, I got my first credit card.
Okay.
And I had bought my first car. Buying my first car was a whole nother, challenge. We'll talk about that at a later date, hopefully. But, get that, so I get my credit rolling. And so when I get my second job making $50,000 a year, I think I'm rich, because at this point I'm making more than my mom has ever made. And prior to that, even when I was making the 30,000, I was making more than my mom had ever made on a job. So when I make the 50, I'm thinking I'm hot stuff.
So, okay, so you started doing that, started making $50,000 a year. So let's talk about how you got yourself in debt.
Thinking I was, balling and rich.
Right.
And not rich or balling.
Right, because you've never seen $50,000 before. So
correct.
Yeah.
I thought,
And you probably didn't have good financial, literacy growing up, right?
No financial literacy.
Right.
None. Started making that, and so had my one credit card. So I think I applied for a secondary credit card with a department store. I would go and shop and, have the nicest outfits to go out. And so then it always fascinated me, though, with credit and credit cards. It always fascinated me for some reason.
What about it? What fascinated you about it?
I don't know. And, and at the time, we didn't have any YouTube videos to really, refer to. But something fascinated me about it, the idea of being able to just get what you want.
On credit and pay it back later.
Easily, yeah. Something just fascinating. And I think from just seeing other people's credit reports and just seeing other people's profile and hearing other people talk, it just something resonated with me. And I'm not gonna think I know what it was. I was one of my coworkers, she asked me, we were talking about my car loan, my first car loan, and she's like, and I tell her my interest rate, and I was like, I had an 8%, and she's like, 8%? 8%? I'm like, yeah, that's good, girl. Isn't that good? And she's like, absolutely not. I think I got a 2%, but I didn't even finance my car. I did, another avenue to pay cash. Right. And I was like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, girl, my mama always got 18%. So, I thought I was good. See,
that's where that whole financial literacy thing, your background, what you see from your parents, your aunts, your uncles.
My mama was paying $500 a month for an old car.
Wow.
And I'm like, I got a brand new car here for $500 a month. Like, girl, what is the problem? Like, why are you hating? And so but something fascinated me about it. Just something, I don't know, just going back.
Right.
And so one day we were slow on work, and I just happened to be applying for credit cards. I think I applied for like 3 credit cards. I think I applied for like a Walmart credit card, and an Old Navy, and an American Express. Got approved on all 3.
Oh wow.
Just like simultaneously. And didn't know what I had. I remember like the American Express card came in like this welcome packet. It was like overnighted to me, and I remember I felt like
American Expresses, they're fancy, they're quick.
It was a platinum. And so I remember like doing my research, like, and even at the time I enjoyed like going to like fancy restaurants and stuff. And so I would always Google like what can make me fancier, or what can make me look fancier. And also, and you asked about the American Express card. When I made $30,000 a year, I loved Saks Fifth Avenue in Neiman Marcus because of those True Religion jeans that I would see her walk around in.
Yeah.
I started shopping at Saks to buy those True Religion jeans, and this is back when True Religion jeans were like $300, $400 a wop.
Oh, wow.
This is before they even had True Religion stores in the mall. And so I would go into the Saks and buy those items, and the Neiman's or whatever, buy the True Religions, and I love like just the luxury items. And Neiman Marcus at the time only accepted a Neiman Marcus credit card, cash, or an American Express.
Oh wow.
So I was like, I need an American Express. Never dawned on me to get a Neiman Marcus card.
Right.
But I ended up getting American Express for Neiman Marcus. And so got the credit card. It came in this beautiful package, this invitation. And so, let me know like, hey, you go to all these airport lounges and stuff like that, and get all these rental car discounts and stuff like that. So it intrigued me, just, having it or whatever. And so getting into debt, I would say traveling, I would go to like the award shows and stuff, and I remember buying like an Hermes belt for like $1,000 with the H on it.
Right.
$1,000, Louis Vuitton wallet.
So what was going through your head at that time in regards to like while you're spending, right? Are you telling yourself, "Oh, I can pay it back.
I can pay it back. I make the money.
Right.
I make the money. I'll have this. After you're $2,000 in debt. Oh, it starts off. I can pay it all in full.
Right.
I'll pay it off every month, and then it starts to. Well, I'll pay $1,000 this week. And I'll pay another $1,000 when I get paid. I'll pay it off in 3 months. It starts like that. And then I think in the interim, I had got myself up to about $8,000 in debt at one point. So I went and got like a consolidation loan from like one of the, finance companies.
Right.
And they gave me like 10 grand. And I remember I was so, good about it. I paid that loan off in like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, I'm debt free again.
Right.
And so, started over. I think I increased all of my credit card limits and stuff like that. So, just shopping and, at the time being young, like I have to fly first class, like, just spending unnecessary money, staying at some of the fanciest, fancier hotels, maybe not the fanciest, but, some of the fancier hotels when traveling, and just, and we're talking domestic. But, going out to LA, having long weekends, spending a gang of money.
I think once we get into the mindset, you're probably at that mindset right now, but I feel like once we get to the mindset of, I only spend what I really can pay back, like as long as it's not gonna really like put a dent in my income, because it's like if half of your income, you can pay it back when you get your income, but it's half of your income going back to it. I feel like once we get ourselves or get our mindsets there, then that kind of helps us to like,
I think very few people get to that mindset. I'm not there.
It takes time. It definitely does take time.
I think that's added pressure to yourself. That's a lot of added pressure. I love Dave Ramsey. I love Susie Orman, but unfortunately, I don't take their advice to heart too much. I love their advice, but for me, it's hard for me to use it. I'm not there. I still overspend. I still do those things. That's natural. It's normal. Someone would lie to you and say that that's not normal. Dave Ramsey overspends. He may have the money. He has the money to overspend. That's the difference. But he buys unnecessary things. But that's natural. That's the natural part about being human. Like I'll be sitting here lying, saying that I still do not overspend, even though to some degree I have my ish together. I still do it. It's normal. It's normal. It's just that different mindset, different place in your life.
So let's talk about, so you kind of racked up debt and whichever you had that job. Did you change job? Let's talk about like how was your credit? Did your credit ever drop?
My credit was pristine.
Okay.
I remember going to like just looking at cars, being bored and stuff, and I could I remember the car at the time. It was my dream car. It was like a 528 BMW. It's like in 2012. And I remember going to the BMW lot, and I remember them offering me like a 1.9% rate. And I was like, oh God,
That's when you know when you like.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, that's what she meant. She was like that 8%. But fast forward after that, I ended up getting a job at another. Now I'm on financial institution number 3. So it seems like I'm moving jobs, rather quickly. But it's climbing up that ladder. Like
Right.
if I tell people, move up. Money is important. Like people stay at jobs for years, being stagnated. You have to move up. You have to,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Jobs may tell you like, hey, your resume looks jam-packed with jobs, but you have to move up. You have to, keep moving. And so on to the next large institution, get that job. I think I'm making $70,000 a year.
You're moving up.
But by this point, I remember like the first week I started that job, I had bought a new Hermes belt, a different color. $1,000 belt. And I remember myself being in so much debt at this point. I'm just still shopping. My American Express card ended up being like $9,000 in 1 month. What I would do is I learned if you buy something on American Express at that time and return it, it will go towards the payment.
Oh.
So my balance is like
pretty much, isn't that like I think that's pretty much like most credit cards because they're crediting the
correct
account.
So my balance is like $9,000. Mind you, I don't have a spending limit. They literally have a 21-year-old with 21, 22-year-old with no
That's
spending
crazy
limit on
though.
American Express Platinum. And so my balance is like $9,000-10,000. So I find myself going to like these department stores, buying another $5,000 item, returning it twice.
Wow.
To cover that month's bill. And at this point I have all this debt, so American Express offers like a pay over time feature, but you have to have the credit to qualify. So they do like a soft pull. They're denying me for the pay over time feature because at this point my credit is like maxed out. Okay. Or the high utilization.
Yeah.
And so they send me a letter and says, hey, we have temporarily suspended your account.
Oh wow.
Because you have did too many credits to pay bills. You haven't paid any, actual money towards your bills.
So they caught on to it. Okay.
Yes, American Express was the catalyst. So mind you, by this point, my department store credit cards are maxed out. My little Walmart credit card is maxed out. Every credit card I got is maxed out.
So can you remember right now, like the total amount of debt that you were in at that time?
I would say about 59,000 or so.
And you were 19?
21, 22. Yeah.
21. Wow.
22, yeah.
And this wasn't student loan debt. This was just credit card debt.
Credit card debt.
Wow.
Credit card loans.
Okay. All right. So take us through the journey now of your credit being, taken.
Credit was horrible. So, well, no. My credit wasn't horrible. My credit wasn't horrible because the thing is my credit score probably had, tainted a little bit. But at that point, I wasn't really, even though I was interested in credit and things like that, I wasn't really privy to credit scores, so much. So I wasn't really checking my credit at that point to really know what my score was or my personal situation was.
Right.
I just know that at this point I was going to miss a credit card payment because American Express actually, they asked for my financials. So I had to send in like a pay stub and tax returns. So when I sent that information in, they cut my limit down to they gave me a limit of $5,000. And at this point I owe $9,000. They did not pay.
Wow. So you went from
unlimited, no preset limit
to
$5,000, and my balance is now $9,000-10,000.
Wow. Why would they do that though? Oh, they put you under.
My finances did not line up to a $10,000 balance that I haven't paid.
Right. I mean, I guess, but it's just
so they have their reasons, and I can't say.
And
I
they're not
with
playing
them too much.
American Express. Yeah, they don't.
And
play.
So, I knew I was going to miss my next month's payment. I knew it. So I was like, oh God, it overwhelmed me. So that's when I sought out bankruptcy because I was like, oh my God, I want a late payment. But thinking back, I would have just hustled up the money. thinking back. I would have hustled up the money and I would have filed bankruptcy. I think I was just overwhelmed at the time and didn't have any other.
How did you? Who told you about bankruptcy at that age? Was it your experience with working in like the collection agency and seeing it on paper? And
I think I had overdone research online, Googling, what do I do if I'm in a boatload of debt and don't know what to do?
Okay, and bankruptcy was one of the first things.
And bankruptcy was one of the things that, hey, you file a Chapter 7, you get rid of your debts.
Okay, and so you knew the difference at the time because, Chapter 7, Chapter 13, yes, you want to talk about which one?
You repay your debts.
Right.
You just pay them at like maybe a lower cost interest rate. A lot of companies will negotiate to get the interest rate, or the government will mandate that they lower the interest rate and accept certain amounts. With the Chapter 7, you're pretty much writing off all your debts in a sense. Like you're just like going belly up. Like I don't have it to pay, and pretty much you have like a clean credit report. Like I advocate for Chapter 7. I wouldn't say abuse it, but I would say that if you're in debt up to your eyeballs, utilize a Chapter 7, and But at 22, I think that wasn't the best decision. I could have did other things to mitigate my debt, and so with having a clean slate, fast forward, maybe a year or so, I'm able to get all these credit cards again.
So a year after you were able to get credit cards,
credit cards probably 60 days after. I think I bought my car. I bought a new car maybe 8 months after, but you're able to pretty much start acquiring new debt maybe 3-4 months after.
Right. And that's interesting too, because people may be saying, how is that so when bankruptcy stays on your credit report for like what, 7-10 years? It depends on the
10
bankruptcy.
10 years for a Chapter 7,
right.
7 years for a Chapter 13.
Right.
So it's like you're gonna get rid of all your debts. We're gonna penalize you behind for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can obtain debt. You can obtain new credit cards. You can buy a house in 2 years. With extenuating circumstances, and so there's ways around it. Bankruptcy hasn't prevented me from doing anything personally, but it has had its challenges.
Okay.
Maybe certain credit cards or something, as long as you apply for it, and they're like no bankruptcies whatsoever. In so many years, and so things like that. As I've gotten older, thank God I wasn't in the government sector of career-wise.
Mm-hmm.
It can prevent you from doing some jobs within the government,
right.
some banking jobs and stuff like that too. But thank God that I necessarily wasn't affected by my filing of bankruptcy.
Okay.
After file bankruptcy, start accumulating new debt. One of those major credit unions out there that gives out all those credit cards and loans to people, y'all know.
They probably know because I probably talked about it before. So
they started giving me all this boatload of credit again.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I'm still young, so they give me all this credit, and of course I find myself back in the same situation. Maybe at this time $40,000 to $50,000 in debt, maybe $10,000 less than what I was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I'm like, well, bankruptcy is not an option. You can only file, every 7-8 years, or Chapter 7. So I'm like, that's not an option. A 13 is an option, but I'm like, I don't really want a Chapter 13. But now I'm just stuck with all this debt that I can't pay. And what happened was I was able to float my debt a lot, of times. Once I got into that the second time, I was able to float and, make minimum payments and stuff like that. So I maintained my credit for the most part. And what happened was I was laid off of work. When I was laid off of work, I was unable to make my payments on all of my debt. So my credit went to craps yet again.
Mm-hmm. And this was at what age by this time?
By this point, I'm maybe 27.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 27.
Okay.
So 5 years after the bankruptcy, I found myself back in trouble yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, I'm unemployed for a year.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm like, hey, it's, living or credit. So at this point I chose living, so I didn't try to stress myself out. So I would say this is where my journey starts, my real journey, or a big part of my journey. 2019, I get a job again. The job they offer me a lower salary than what I'm accustomed to by this point. And from that $70,000 salary, I had moved jobs and went up to near 6 figures at this point.
Oh, wow.
And so they offered me in 2019.
And let's pause right there for a second for the people. Like 6 figures or almost 6 figures, high school dropout, no college degree, right? And it's possible
Of course.
It's possible to make, 6 figures without a college degree. You sometimes have to like possibly find certain career fields, like technical career fields, but then there are some like specialty careers, like, the mortgage industry, financial service industry. So
yeah, I think people research, and when you Google how to wiki, that's going to give you probably the most advanced route to get to where you're trying to get. You have to talk to people, get other scenarios, get other advice. I think that doing the one-stop shop never works.
Right.
Now, you can't be a surgeon, obviously, off of the one-stop shop, but, you can, be something else.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I take a job making a lot less salary than what I was accustomed to. And so started working there, one of the best jobs that I probably ever had in my life, a great company. Start working there, but finding myself not really able to get out of debt. Decent salary, not as much as what I'm used to making, but I found myself not being able to get out of debt. Like, it wasn't easy to just pay $40,000-$50,000 in debt. It wasn't easy. And so the changing moment for me, I got a job offer paying a lot more, base, $20,000 more. And they were like, our bonuses, everyone here makes at least, $3 to $5 grand a month in bonuses. Got the job. They did a credit check. They told me that, hey, you have to write a letter due to your credit. Wrote the letter, and I wrote a plan with it, how I plan to tackle the debt with the newfound, my newfound money. And they deny me anyway. They tell me, hey, we're not hiring you because you're a credit.
Oh, wow.
So I think that was a changing moment for me. I was like, oh God, this is, serious. And here comes 2020. The pandemic. During that period, or even prior to that, I wanted to buy a house. And let's back up for a moment. When I worked for the job, when I got the American Express, I worked for the institution at the time is a well-known, allegedly racist company. It's the company that, held Wendy Williams funds. I'll say that. I applied for a mortgage with them back when I could get a house for $70 grand.
Oh, wow.
A nice house. I was put through so many ringers to where I just gave up.
Wow.
I was put through so many ringers, and it's so crazy. Bring up credit score. My mortgage score at the time was a 670. And yeah, they put me through so many things. I just gave up. I think I didn't have any financial literacy or anyone around me to give me that, to tell me like, hey, keep going, this is important, get your house now, yada,
right
yada. So
because one thing I want to ask, because first of all, yes, I know with the mortgage process it can be tedious. Like you give them one document, you think they're done, and it's like they ask you for it's almost like they're asking you for the same document over and over and over.
There was a lot of redlining at that time. More so for me, there was a lot of redlining, in my opinion. Redlining means, targeting a specific group, or, and I may not be giving the exact definition, but it's targeting a specific group, not giving them access to loans and stuff like that equally as the next person. So, I think it's sort of like a discrimination type thing. I don't want to,
even though they say on the bottom of their
correct, we don't discriminate and all that
equal opportunity housing, credit lending stuff.
It's still to this day very prevalent. And not to get off topic, one of my good friends down in Mississippi, he's a builder, and he tells me that to this day it's like heavy. Redlining African Americans.
It's a shame, and they act like it doesn't exist, but it does. They say they don't, but they do.
It definitely matters.
100%. Yeah, it matters, and it still exists today.
Once I became a little bit more versed in the area, I realized like the redlining that occurred.
Okay.
And so a lot of that makes sense.
So I wanted to ask, so you said like your mortgage score at the time was like 670, right? What would you say, coming from your background,
The mortgage score was
is
never the
the
issue. It was more so they made it so hard for me. Tell us about this large deposit. Tell us about this. And mind you, at the time, I was buying a HUD property,
okay?
$100 down.
Oh wow.
So I was not using any of my large deposits at the time. $800.
They consider that large deposit?
Correct. FHA, 1% of the sales price or more
Is large deposit.
is large deposit. So looking at a house for $70,000 at the time, I think my loan amount at the time was like $80,000 that I got pre-approved for, because houses weren't as expensive then. This is when the market was still tanked. This is like in 2011 or so. And so I think my pre-approved was for $80,000 or so. And so I had large deposits for, $800 and stuff like that. And so I couldn't really tell them where it was from, because I didn't know where they were from. I didn't.
You didn't know where your deposits were from?
Well, they were just like, deposits. Well, I know where they were from, child, but I can't say all that. They consider like, some of these, in my eyes, small deposits, large deposits. And, that could be from, taking your money out, buying something, depositing in the back or whatever, It was just a hard, follow for me. And no one explained that process to me going into it. Hey, don't have any large deposits. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that I needed to wait 2 months since I didn't have any. I just was not privy to that information, and so I went into it blind. Instead of being coached through it at the time, it was more so like you screwed up in a sense, and so it was like no help during that process. And I'm not sure if it was that institution or just my ignorance. Who knows?
So he gave up, and then you applied elsewhere. You started the process again immediately.
I let it go.
Oh,
I let it go.
You kind of like gave up on the whole buying a house situation.
I didn't know. Lack of financial literacy would be my answer to that. And so...
And this was 2011,
2012, around that neighborhood.
Okay.
And so fast forward to the, me having my job, getting turned down for that one job about my credit. I was looking at houses. I wanted this house so badly. It was like for... $400,000. I was like, I want this house so bad. I want this house. I would do like the little mortgage calculator. And it was always, I knew my credit wasn't there. And so fast forward to the pandemic, I ended up leaving my job that I did love very, very much for a higher paying job due to the fact that the housing market changed in 2020 when it got real hot. So I was offered a job, and it came with a very lucrative sign-on bonus. And
those are good. Those
sign-on bonus pretty much equaled, or a little less or more, my debt load that I owed.
Oh wow!
So at that point, I knew that I would be out of debt in literally 2 months. And so I started looking at houses in September of 2020.
Okay.
And prior to that, I had downloaded, and this is probably like starting in 2014, 2015, I downloaded My FICO. And this is not an advertisement or they're not paying me anything. I downloaded My FICO. And I was a avid watcher of Susie Orman. So that's probably why I got my love of credit and credit cards.
Okay.
My dad would watch Susie Orman when I was a kid. And I wasn't an annoyed child by it. I would be interested in it.
I have her book. I bought a book. Well, somebody gave me, I think, her book, the money book for the rich, broke, and fabulous. Have you ever heard of that book?
I haven't. I don't own any of her products, but I think I cried when that lady left. The TV screen. I cried. It was like Oprah or Wendy leaving. I tell you. I downloaded My FICO probably in like 2014, 2015. It's like a little app. You pay like $40 a month. I downloaded it again in 2020 when I was paying off my debt. I went to go and look at a house in September of 2020. Beautiful house. I fell in love with it. I hate to this day I didn't get it. It's doubled in value since. And pulled my FICO before I even applied for a mortgage. And this is before, I hadn't really paid off any debt just yet. My mortgage score, I want to say was a 4. The mid score was like a 480. and the other one was like a 460. The other one was like a 503. I don't know, something, crazy low. And this is September of 2020. Pay off all my debt, slowly. The charge-offs I pay in full. Some of the collection items, some of the charge-offs they had turned into collections, I did pay for delete. Some I just settled and then disputed to get off of my credit. And I'll divulge a little bit more into that.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you, especially with the pay for the delete.
Oh, and let's back up. March of 2020, right around the week of the pandemic starting, I paid someone $1,000 to do a credit cleanup. So by September of 2020, and he promised, I'll have you done in 60 days. I reach out in 60 days. It's going to take a little bit longer because I have so many people.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be more like 90 days. But I guarantee you, in 90 days, you're going to see your score. You're going to be able to go buy you a house.
Oh, wow.
Call him at 90 days. He's just taking a little bit longer. Just give me 30 more days. You're going to be able to go buy that house. I promise you.
It keeps pushing it back.
I promise you, you're going to buy that house in 90 days, in another 30 days or whatever.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he keeps telling me that. And so I think around July, I just was like, to help this person. Like, he's not coming through. And so my credit still tanked or whatever. And so early July of 2020 is when I start getting job offers. And so that's when I had like a breath of fresh air. I'm like, oh God, I can get this sign-on bonus. I can take care of all my debt. Yay. Fast forward, I'm looking at the house and I didn't qualify. I had those low mortgage FICO scores. Paying off my debt, collection accounts, pay for delete.
And so you started the process on your own, right?
I started the process on my own, and simply off of, you read these forums on my FICO, and you read these forums on Quora, and all of these different Reddit, these different sites telling you how to get your credit together. But those things mean nothing without the money.
Right.
Let's be clear. I can't sit here and paint this glamorous story that you can overcome debt and all these things without having any money. And that's not to say money is easy to come by, but you do have to have money. So, people who don't have money, who are great savers, keep saving and get to that point to pay off these things and do what I did. But the people who have money or are expecting money, do what I did. Follow.
And
exactly.
what would your advice be to people who aren't making enough money to really sustain themselves and pay off debt? Like, what's the solution to that?
I would say this: if you're working at the local supermarket, you need to be trying to figure out how you're going to become the manager of the supermarket. Figuring out ways to pivot into more money, some sort of way. And I don't necessarily think that, working 3 jobs is the answer. If you have to work 3 jobs to get by, you're doing something wrong.
Right. I believe that. And yeah, I'm big into side hustling too. Like, find some side hustle that you can do to,
Working for 3 companies at once, you're doing something wrong. If you are needing these companies or you're needing these jobs to get by. Now, it's a difference if you're just working them just to have extra money and you're just working them because you like having a whole bunch of money. But if you're working 2 and 3 jobs because you need it, that is an issue. That is an issue. You need to go back to school to get some other kind of training. And I don't think school, my history and my experience in school. But I think if you're working 2 dead-end jobs to make it, you're doing something wrong.
Because really, the goal should be for one of those jobs should be able to give you the 3, what you'll be getting in total
your
from those
expenses,
3.
Yeah, your living expenses, your day to day.
Yeah.
So
So he's not saying that something
extra to pay off debt and things like that. Nothing's wrong with working 3 jobs. Let me be clear. But if you depend on 3 jobs, that is an issue.
Right.
You're doing something wrong.
Right.
It is what it is. You're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not talking about working for yourself having 3 different revenue incomes. I'm talking if you're working, at the supermarket, the bartending job, and you're working at the department store, you're doing something wrong. You need to reevaluate it.
So, one last question before we shut down, because I know we've been going for a minute. We can talk all day, okay? But we gotta go. But there's one thing that I want to ask you.
Sure.
For people who are trying to purchase their homes, right? Or purchase their first house, but they have a low credit score, how should they go about it? What advice do you have for them?
I would say, pull your credit report, my FICO, look at the items that you have, and don't be discouraged. Don't look at it and feel like it's this uphill battle. In 2019, 2020, I was just like most people who are longing to purchase their first home, or longing to purchase another home, who may have lost their home prior or something. Go for it. Check your credit, check your mortgage score. If your mortgage score lines up, do your own research. You can Google mortgage guidelines. You can Google Fannie Mae. You can Google Freddie Mac. You can Google FHA. It's not, lenders have their overlays, but, pretty much you can Google all of these things, come to YouTube to see us. But, you can Google these things. And so, I just want to make sure that our audience hear things in layman's terms and, not so watered down in a sense of, let me tell this story. You need a credit score, yada, 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 yada. I wanted to just give it in layman's terms and, hopefully, in the future, give even more, advice.
Absolutely. We probably have a part
Ask
2.
your questions in the comments and, we'll divulge more into it.
Absolutely. We'll definitely answer.
We may not cover everything today.
Right, exactly. So if you have any questions at all, make sure that you leave the questions in the comments. You know that I like to go back to my comments and respond as much as possible.
Things you may not understand, no question is a dumb question. No question is,
Right.
too low to answer. We sometimes we walk through life, wanting to know simple things and we just never ask them. So don't feel, like anyone's going to judge you. This is a judgment-free zone here.
Absolutely. 100% judgment free. Love it, love it. Well, thank you so much, Mr. OJ. Listen, if you guys liked today's episode, if you learned something today, okay, make sure that you hit that thumbs up button if you are watching on YouTube. If you are listening on any of the podcast platforms out there, Spotify, Apple, Google, all that good stuff, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, okay? And share this episode, especially to somebody that you know that's looking to purchase their first home. All right, so I'll go ahead and put OJ's YouTube link. You can go ahead and subscribe to his channel. He doesn't have any videos up yet. You want to tell the people about that?
I will start making videos, and so I'll make sure I keep my fro and stuff, and I'll make a video about it as well.
Exactly. So go on over to Mr. OJ's YouTube and subscribe, okay? But listen, y'all, it was good today, okay? He shared the tea, and what I like about him, what I love about him actually, is that he keeps it real, okay? No sugarcoating and all that good stuff, all right? And I hope that you guys learned something today and found value in today's podcast, all right? Don't forget to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell as well. That way, whenever I post a new video, you'll be the first to know. Again, it's your girl, Shy-Bivia. It was an absolute pleasure. Let's continue to grow those businesses and get financially healthy together. And I'll see you guys later. Be blessed. Bye.